in our society and any external system, there are power structures, right? And what we're discussing here is that power structures are really about how power is divided and distributed in a society. So when we're thinking about a country like the United States, these can be things like formal things like laws, regulations, political power and influence, or more intangible, informal things like cultural norms and traditions, right? We have different deference and respect for our elders depending on the region of America that we grew up in, or if we have parents who come from a different country like mine. The way that we regard elders, the way that we regard our older siblings, the way that we regard other people is related to that. So you can see how cultural norms and traditions, and then also existing systems and power structures influence the way that we go about life. It influences the decisions that we make. It influences our concept of what is permissible to do and what is not permissible to do. And there are repercussions and effects depending on those choices, right? So what I'm arguing here is that the same thing happens internally. And within each of us, there also exist systems and power structures. And what I mean by this is that there are a lot of things internally within each of us that hold a lot of power over us. And conversely, there are a lot of things within each of us, or components of the self, parts of the self, like internal family systems or parts work or Jungian, oriented psychotherapy, right? That are also disempowered. For example, like I shared earlier, you might have had a traumatic experience that holds a lot of emphasis on how you navigate everyday life today. You get in a car accident and now you are experiencing a little bit of trauma anytime you're in a high-speed vehicle, for example. So this can also happen incrementally over time. This generally happens incrementally over a process of years and years and years, to the point where sometimes we look up or we look into our lives and say, how did I get here? How did I get to this place where I'm living my life like this, or I'm feeling like this? And that is because these power systems and power structures will play out, they'll develop, they'll change over time. So one of the things that we're talking about is, how do we add a level of intentionality to this? How do we add a level of mindfulness to this as well? And I'm hoping for the folks who are listening, you can see how this is tied into something that is so celebratory of our history as Americans, like Thanksgiving, right? Also, the power systems and structures within ourselves internally may not be intentional. They could be due to things outside of our control. Like I said, trauma, life circumstance, things that happened to us, how we were raised, what our families were like, our level of education, and the list goes on and on and on and on. The best way that I can describe this for folks to really like land what I'm trying to express here is, just think about your emotions for a little bit. There are emotions and feelings that are generally accepted and regarded as positive. Feeling generous, feeling joyful, feeling happy, feeling connected, feeling fulfilled, right? Out of the probably hundreds of maybe a few thousand emotions that one can experience, there are some that we really celebrate internally and when we see it in other people. And then there are other feelings and emotions that we really condemn. Feeling jealous, feeling angry, feeling frustrated are some that I can describe off the top of my head. And the context in which we live gives us permission on whether it's okay to feel that thing or not. And then you add another layer, that the context of our identity and how we are perceived also adds a lens on what is permissible for us to do or not do. So if you looked at this from just that symptomatic approach, the idea would be, well, I want to have more of these feelings, which I regard as good, and I want to have less of these feelings, which I regard as bad. But what we're doing is we're just putting labels on it, right? Fear, as I expressed in this preparation workshop, can be extremely useful in the right setting. Anger can be extremely, extremely useful in the right context. Let's say somebody violates a boundary of yours. Well, sometimes you need to express some anger to assert your boundary. Or let's say, God forbid, that you are in some type of life-threatening situation. Well, fear can kick in your nervous system and help you get from point A to point B, an area that is a little bit safer, or may help you protect a loved one in, let's say, a physical confrontation. And so I'll remind us that we are working on very ancient technology here. Our bodies and our minds and our nervous system and stuff have really developed over, a couple of hundred thousands of years, but the advancements of society have been happening very, very, very quickly over the past, modern era. And so what I share with folks is to really have an open space for all types of feelings and emotions that may come up. And if you label those things, regard these as good and I want to have more of these, and these are bad and I want to have less of these, then you may be limiting the potential of what might come up and how to navigate and bring the most insight from your psychedelic experience.